Hi everyone, I'm Bree the Plant Lady, and today I'm going to take you on a beautiful spring tour here at the North Carolina Botanical Garden in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. This garden focuses on conservation and native plants, and there is just so much to learn from walking around this garden at different times of the year. I can't get over how different it looks just from a few weeks ago when I was last here filming for No Rules Gardening. So come along and let me show you everything that is blooming here in beautiful Chapel Hill. In the courtyard garden, there is so much to take in. Of course, the native Aquilegia canadensis is in full bloom. There's so many wonderful plants blooming right now, including Aquilegia canadensis, different baptisias. There's different varieties of phlox are in flower, as well as courtyard and chrysogonum. What I love about this courtyard space at the Botanic Garden is that it's full sun, and it really can give people some ideas for how you can incorporate native plants into your home landscape, including great trees like Sassafras albidum. Without question, one of the stars of the show right now is the Cicericium angustifolium. You can see that is just a fantastic plant to put right along the edge of a bed, give it some great color and texture. The lobed tickseed, coreopsis, it's in flower right now, and you can see why it's called lobed. It's in reference to its leaves, which usually have 3 small segments on them. Adjacent here, one of my favorite spring blooming ground covers is Chrysogonum virginianum, the green and gold. And what's great about this is that it's really adaptable. It can grow in full sun into dense shade. Now, the Botanical Garden is well known for their carnivorous plant collection, and here you can see the Sarracenias are in their flowering stage, which is particularly beautiful. I can't wait to show you more when we get into the carnivorous plant section. One of my all-time favorite native plants for the southeast is Baptisia australis, and you can see how these clumps are really big and full, and they've really just started to bloom. This looks like Carolina Moonlight, which is actually a cultivar that was introduced by the Botanical Garden. If you follow No Rules Gardening, you know that Jim and I, back in January, both went nuts over this Finch's Gold Ilex decidua, and now it's leafed out. It's actually in flower right now. And those flowers will get pollinated, and long term, that's where the fresh berries will form. Now at the base of that, everything has come to life. So here we've got, we have a sign confirming Phlox divaricata. That's this. I think the pink is Phlox pilosa. I'm gonna keep my eyes peeled for a label. I am a native enthusiast, but not a native plant expert for IDing, and I don't want to claim to be, but I just have a great deal of appreciation for this plant palette, and I think it's so amazing that these are all plants that are actually from here. And you can see, you can make a big statement with this Aquilegia canadensis, the eastern columbine. Now you might be wondering what is going on with the leaves. A lot of people always ask that at this time of year. This is not natural variegation. This is caused from a leaf miner. It's a little insect that gets in between and, kind of tunnels around. It doesn't hurt the plant at all. I don't see any reason to try and treat it. So I have no advice on how to get rid of leaf miners other than just to sort of accept it. And it's kind of like artistry. Each little tunnel is a little bit different. There's so much pollinator activity in this garden, especially with big fat bumblebees. They love Tradescantia. This is another fantastic plant that, you know, everybody should grow. The fact that it's native is just a huge bonus. And then at the base of that is Potentilla canadensis. And this is kind of a relative, it's in the Rosaceae family. So it sometimes gets mixed up with strawberries, but you see it actually has 5 segments to its leaves, but cute little yellow blooms that a lot of native pollinators depend on. It's a great ground cover, super low maintenance, doesn't need to be irrigated or fertilized. So a lot of home gardeners would see this and kind of freak out because, wow, that's a lot of impatiens. But this is a great native plant that actually serves a whole bunch of different functions. Like, it can cure dermatitis, like specifically poison ivy. So I have this growing in my woodland and I just leave it alone. I love how here at the Botanical Garden, you know, they really show you how you can grow it in mass and make such a big impact. This will bloom in the middle of summer, but I think it has a great texture at this time of year. So make my way out of the courtyard into the area of Piedmont prairie. It's amazing how much this has changed in just the last few weeks since my last visit. Everything has come back to life. The staff has gotten everything kind of cut back and cleaned up. And it's really great to see the possum haw, Viburnum nudum, all in full flower. If you've seen this along, you know, the sides of the streets, there's your identification, Viburnum nudum. Another one of my favorite spring flowering native shrubs is Calycanthus. This is Calycanthus floridus, the native Carolina allspice, or sweet Betsy as people call it. And you can see those beautiful burgundy flowers, and behind that is an Aeschylus, or a variety of, or a species of buckeye. Like I said, my native plant ID is basic at best, and I am in love with this plant. However, I am not familiar with Lithospermum canescens at all, and I'm not sure if that label is for the plant that's flowering or this plant. So I feel really dumb, but that's okay. My cell service sucks here, so I can't even Google it. But I'm definitely going to figure out what this is because I want it. It's really, really beautiful. One native plant that is super identifiable is Eryngium yucifolium, and that is this broadleaf with just the tiny little pricks along the stem. Here's the sign for that. This in the summer will send up these great big tall spikes with kind of round ball flowers. It's the coolest thing ever. So highly recommend growing Eryngium yucifolium, the rattlesnake master. Well, look at this beautiful little section with these Indian paint brushes blooming right along with foam flower, the tiarella, that's the white that's in flower. This is a gorgeous combination, something that I'm very inspired by, and I'm just kind of making a list of all the native plants that I need to start indulging in to add and fill in some areas at my own house. One of the really popular native plants is Amsonia, and you know, that's something that you see in a lot of gardens all over the world now. It's got this great little star-shaped sort of bluish purple flower. And then in and among here you see the chrysogonum is just doing its job. It's filling in as a great low maintenance ground cover. You can see there's, you know, bees and different moths and all kinds of different pollinators gathering nectar from all of these little flowers. And overall, it's just such a beautiful sight to see this cultivated native plants and the opportunities that they really can afford you when you include them in your landscape. What's so remarkable about any garden, but this garden in particular, is how every week it changes, and every week there'll be like a different plant combination that's kind of the star of the show. So it's worth coming to visit the garden with regularity so that you can really experience those changes and grow to love a much broader plant palette. Now I'm about to enter into the woodland area. First the kind of wetland or swamp area, and then the ecosystem that mimics into the North Carolina mountains. And that's one of the really unique attributes of this garden, is that you can actually walk across the state of North Carolina and understand the flora of this region by walking through this garden. So you have so much to be able to learn. All you have to do is come to Chapel Hill to get to experience that. From my videos, I have a woodland swamp in my backyard, and it isn't quite as charming as this because mine is filled with invasive plants like privet. Whenever I come here, I get very inspired to try and fix my woodland so that it would be a better ecosystem service, because this is a whole lot better than just a wall of a non-native invasive like what I have in my yard. The ferns are really spectacular this season when they're just unfurling. I mean, look at that. How could anybody not be a fern lover? It's so peaceful. You almost forget you're kind of right in the middle of downtown Chapel Hill until a siren runs by. I mean, the UNC hospital system is just like not even a mile from here. So it's just such a wonderful respite from the chaos of, our everyday. Now I'm coming into the mountain habitat, and this is going to be really beautiful because all the azaleas and stuff are in bloom, but the rhododendrons have not started, neither have the mountain laurels, the kalmia. So that'll be for another trip, another visit here for when those start to flower. But you can see over here the native deciduous azaleas, like the pinksters, are all in full bloom. And you can see trilliums are flowering, and violets, chrysogonum, more aquilegia, tons of ferns. Let's get an up-close picture of these beautiful rhododendron. This is I can never say this botanical name. Here, I'll just show it to you. I call them pinksters. That's their common name. I have these in my yard. Actually, I grow mine in full sun, and they're super dense. So these are a really versatile plant, but natively they grow as kind of an understory shrub. These flowers are so fragrant. So there's a lot of reasons that I love this garden. First of all, I think that their outreach for conservation is extremely important. I'm a board member here, so I'm always trying to help come up with creative ideas for, getting more people to become members and to be a part of their great education. I've been doing webinars for them for the last few weeks. I have one more. It's coming up on Tuesday, April 20th from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern. There is still time to register. It's all about foodscaping with natives, and that was my motivation for coming today. I needed to get more photos of native plants blooming right now so I can give appropriate foodscape pairing suggestions. But now behind me is a building that I am always drawn to when I visit, and that's because my first 3 years of living in North Carolina, here in Chapel Hill, I lived in a converted tobacco barn just like this one, and those were some of the happiest years of my life. And I had a house flood in 2010. I re-rented that old tobacco barn and moved back in while the house was being rebuilt. And if you've never had the experience of hanging out in a tobacco barn, I highly recommend it. Post-pandemic, you can rent cabins just like this around the state and have an authentic North Carolina experience. This mix of the phlox and these different ferns, it's just so magical. It really does feel like a fairyland. All right, now here we are at the Aesculus. That is Aesculus sylvatica, the painted buckeye. I just really like Aesculus in general, so I highly recommend growing them. So it's really funny, I've always sort of feel cheated that when I was studying horticulture, the native plants movement hadn't really taken steam yet. And so I don't know what a lot of these plants are because I wasn't taught them. They weren't ever a part of the nurseries that I've worked at. And generally, my intuition from, kind of growing up and the education I have, it's like when you see a seed head like that, oh, that's the indication that it's weedy, it's invasive. But then you take a step back and you recognize that, yeah, that seed distribution makes it colonize in this really fantastic way. It means you don't have to mulch. And it's benefiting pollinators, and, it makes me rethink, the word weed. Even though I have a couple of plants in my garden that no one's gonna change my mind on. Oh, good, finally. Tacaria aurea, golden ragwort. I really think with native plants, we just need to have a common name change, because golden ragwort doesn't sound great. So this should be called something nicer, and then I think it would probably increase in popularity. Who wouldn't want something that looks like this in their yard? This is so much more interesting than open mulch space that you're constantly having to micromanage. Being an edible enthusiast, I'm always happy to see food crops being grown, and these kind of feed troughs are a great solution, especially if you don't have a lot of ground space. You can also grow native plants in them. And the whole point of my webinar on Tuesday is to show people how you can actually combine this concept with that concept and grow them all together. This is such a great time for Aesculus, but also for all these tiny little iris that are blooming just kind of in the cracks. This is Iris cristata, the dwarf crested iris. It's just the sweetest little thing. Great perennial. Again, fantastic native plant. Phlox is really making a statement here in this deeper shade garden. See all that beautiful blue. Phlox divaricata is definitely a plant that I need to get some more of, include in my native woodland area. And look at how beautiful it looks mixed with a native deciduous azalea. And Fothergilla major. There's a lot of different cultivars that are great. I happen to love Blue Shadow, but you just can't go wrong with the straight species, as you see here. Fothergilla can be kind of a suckering shrub, so give it the right amount of space so that you're not going to be fighting it for its natural habit. It's great for, you know, shade, to part sun, the animals leave it alone. You get these wonderfully soft, fragranced flowers. I love this viburnum nudum that has the Lonicera sempervirens just running through it. So you don't even have to have a structure to be able to grow that. You can just let the Lonicera ramble through some of your other deciduous flowering trees and shrubs. Now I'm entering the part of the garden that isn't necessarily native plant focused, and you're greeted here with a beautiful rose. This is Old Blush. And let's see if it smells. Oh my gosh, it does, you guys. It smells like a real rose. Oh my gosh, what an incredible fragrance. No, I'm not a huge raised bed gardener. If I was to do it, I would do it like this, with brick. Wood is just so ugly and it rots, and it's not a good long-term solution. So I love here at the Botanical Garden how they've made these raised planters to grow non-native things. Specifically here we have a lot of herbs. These are all Mediterranean natives. I have explained in many videos, North Carolina is not a Mediterranean climate at all. Like, we are way too wet. So you have to increase drainage to grow these plants successfully. And these beautiful brick raised beds are, I think, the perfect solution for that. Now we're coming into the kitchen garden, and they've got these great espaliered apples along these fences to greet you. And then in here they have concrete planters. And it's really cool how they have this distinguished. They have industrial herbs, you know, things that are used maybe not so much for culinary purposes, and then culinary herbs on this side. And this is kind of the only, other than that area where I showed you right around the buildings that was full sun, the courtyard, that area is the only kind of full sun that they have here. So now you get into, you know, growing different plants that have, you know, medicinal purposes. This is like all medicinal herbs. So these are also plants that will grow in more shade. And, you know, if you really think about it, all of the medicine that we have today is the result of botanicals. It was all plants that led to the pharmaceutical industry. And this is a great place to learn more about the plants that we all inevitably take for granted. I think one of the more interesting and educational areas of the garden here is this Native American herbal section. So these are the plants that the Native Americans used, you know, before the colonists came. And these are plants that are found, you know, in our native woods that we probably don't really even recognize or know the name for. It's just a great display, full of educational information. Like here, we've got the common jack in the pulpit, Erycema triphyllum, and if you look really closely, they're in bloom. You see how cute those little flowers are? They look almost just like the leaves because, you know, they're all green. But this is the time of year where they are flowering. Of course, there's a lot of different varieties of Erycema that are native. Now, one native plant that people like me need to stay away from, but I see it, so I'm going to point it out to you, is poison ivy. And that is right there. See, 3 leaves, and they're shiny. So you stay away from that if you are like me and you get contact dermatitis from that. And that was probably planted by a bird. That's how it's often spread. And look at these beautiful spring flowering zephyranthes. This is the Adamasco lily, a really large flowered native rain lily. So when I was last here filming with Jim Putnam from HortTube for No Rules Gardening, we did a little segment from this area. It's a longleaf pine, you see above me, and they were just getting ready to do a controlled burn. And so that happened probably 3 weeks ago, and you can see how everything has, started to grow back really rapidly, and controlled burns are really important. Here at the Botanic Garden, they have a lot of really great signage that, gives you the information you need to better understand these methods. And I just could not resist walking down this path because of this amazing lupin. And yeah, I mean, look at that. All of a sudden, my list has grown exponentially. It's the great thing about gardening. You'll never have it all. You'll always need to go plant shopping. I mentioned Amsonia earlier. Here's a different species. This is ciliata, and has, that same kind of blue flower. This one has more finely dissected foliage. As I make my way over to the children's garden, I am first greeted with these incredible spikes of milkweed. This is common milkweed, and this is an Asclepias that I don't grow, that I need to grow. I just need to get some seeds, scatter them around, let it naturalize, and the monarchs will appreciate the effort. How fun is this? I'm a sucker for a hammock. I love the natural play elements that the Botanical Garden has created so that children can really immerse themselves and not be afraid of nature. Actually value it and enjoy it. That's the best way that we'll develop better stewardship practices in the future. So if we educate the children now when they're small. This is one of the starkest changes compared to the last time I was here, when everything was still fully up from the last growing season. And it's really important to note that you should wait to do your major cutbacks until the plants start reflushing. And that's because so many of these plants actually create habitat for beneficial insects to overwinter. And I love these bee hotels, but really the stalks of all of this native solidago and different ornamental grasses and orangium and everything else that's mixed in here is equally important to these highly ornamental bee hotels that people install. This is really set up for a lot of different purposes. It's all flowering material that bloom at different times of the season, but it's also a rain garden. So you see, it's designed so that the water flows to the lowest point, and the water here is all basically, cleansed before it leaves the property, which is a really important consideration in this region where we get so much rainfall, especially through the winter, when the plants aren't actively absorbing water as much as they would be through the summertime. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this tour from the North Carolina Botanic Garden, showcasing all of the beautiful spring flowers that are native to this region. And I'd encourage you to check out the North Carolina Botanical Garden, sign up for a webinar. Remember, I have my final webinar of the spring coming up on Tuesday, April 20th from 6 to 8 p.m., all about foodscaping with natives, and I would love to see you there. Thanks so much for watching, everybody.